My name is Alex Carter, and if you'd met me 5 years ago, you'd have called me a ghost. Not because I was lifeless, but because I moved through life unseen, unnoticed, by choice. As the heir to Carter Industries, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, I knew the spotlight was always waiting to consume me, so I stayed in the shadows, refusing boardroom invitations and dodging questions about the future of the company. I wanted nothing to do with that life. But then, I'd met Emma. Emma was the antithesis of everything I'd grown up with. A marine biologist, she had no interest in wealth or corporate politics. Her passion was the ocean, and she dedicated her life to cleaning the mess humanity dumped into it. When we first met at a small charity event, she was presenting a slideshow about her recent expedition to a floating garbage patch in the Pacific. Her voice trembled with anger as she showed image after image of sea creatures trapped in nets and choking on plastic. Yet there was also hope in her tone, a belief that change was possible if people cared enough. I fell for her that night, hard. Marrying Emma was the easiest decision of my life, even though it meant stepping even further away from my family's expectations. I supported her from the sidelines, funding her projects anonymously and cheering her on as she fought battles that seemed impossible. But Emma was unstoppable. She built a team, gathered volunteers, and even got small companies to back her initiatives. Still, her work didn't shield her from cruelty. It was during one of her biggest cleanup projects that the storm hit, both literally and metaphorically. Emma had taken her team to a massive trash vortex, aiming to break it apart and recycle what they could. The task was grueling, with endless setbacks. The local funding partner, a smug CEO named Paul Gregson, grew impatient and started undermining her. "She's wasting our money," he told her team in front of everyone one day. "If she can't handle the pressure, maybe she's in the wrong line of work. Useless people shouldn't lead." When Emma called me that evening, her voice broke as she recounted the humiliation. I could feel her pain through the phone, and it lit a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. What Paul Gregson didn't know was that Carter Industries held a significant stake in his company. And what Emma didn't know was that I'd been quietly stepping back into the world I once avoided, preparing for the day I could wield my power not for profit, but for purpose. That day had come. The problem started small, like most things in life that spiral out of control. Emma had been working tirelessly on a groundbreaking marine cleanup project in the Pacific, one that could change the entire approach to ocean preservation. But Paul Gregson, the CEO of the partner company, made it clear that he had no faith in her methods. He called the project a waste of resources, and even had the nerve to say she was too idealistic for this type of work. I never fully understood what Emma had to endure in her world of passion for the environment and the disdain she often met in return. I was used to the corporate battles, the backstabbing, the power struggles, but seeing her face that morning when she told me about Gregson's dismissal of her work, it tore something inside me. I wasn't going to stand by and let this man break her. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't just fighting for her reputation. I was fighting against a system that made people like Paul Gregson feel untouchable. I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went. The first few weeks after Gregson's comments were filled with tension. Emma's self-doubt began creeping in. She stopped sleeping as much. Her team grew restless, and the media started to pick up on the negative press surrounding the project. I could see her changing, withdrawing into herself, and I hated it. Her spark was fading, and it was because of a man who didn't understand the ocean, let alone care about its future. She didn't want me to intervene. She insisted that I stay out of it. "I don't want to be seen as someone who needs a rich husband to fight her battles," she told me one night, her voice barely a whisper. The vulnerability in her words stabbed me, but I respected her wishes. At least I tried to. However, I knew that there was only so much time before things became irreparable. Emma was strong, but she couldn't carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone, not with people like Gregson sabotaging her at every turn. And that's when I made the decision. The irony was that no one, except a handful of people within my family, knew just how involved I really was with Carter Industries. My father, who had been the face of the company for decades, had kept me out of the spotlight for years, preferring to run things without interference. But with his recent health issues, he'd started to relinquish control to me, even if only behind the scenes. I had access to more power than anyone realized. The more I looked into Gregson's dealings, the more I realized how tangled the situation was. He had been siphoning money from the company for years, padding his own pockets while making false promises to investors. He had undermined the marine project in the hopes that it would fail so he could back out of the partnership with minimal damage. He saw Emma's work as a threat to his bottom line, and he was willing to ruin her to protect his own interests. What he didn't know was that I had already begun leveraging my influence. I called in favors from people in the finance world, subtly positioning myself as a major shareholder in his company. I couldn't just confront Gregson directly, not yet. I had to play my cards carefully, but my patience was running thin. I needed to get his attention before Emma lost everything she'd worked for. But here's where things got complicated. Emma still didn't know the truth about who I really was. She had no idea that the quiet, supportive husband who stood by her side was also the man who held the fate of her project, and Gregson's future at his fingertips. She had always seen me as an outsider in her world, a background figure who gave her space to lead her initiatives, but never truly understood the corporate chaos that surrounded her. I had kept my identity hidden, not out of malice, but out of a desire to let her stand on her own. I didn't want her to feel like she owed me anything, especially not in the context of her career. But now, I was at a crossroads. My decision to intervene was no longer just about helping her. It was about choosing a side: corporate power or personal integrity. And with every passing day, I could feel the weight of that choice bearing down on me. The stakes were high. If I revealed my connection to the company, I risked losing Emma's trust. She had always prided herself on being independent, on making her mark on the world without relying on anyone else, let alone a husband with hidden agendas. But if I didn't act now, if I let Gregson continue his sabotage unchecked, I risked losing her, too, emotionally, professionally, and perhaps even personally. I had never been one for confrontation. But in that moment, as I sat in my office, surrounded by the carefully curated trappings of wealth and influence, I realized that my hesitation wasn't just about keeping Emma in the dark. It was about fear. Fear of losing the woman I loved because I wasn't being honest with her. And I knew that if I didn't do something soon, I might never have the chance to make things right. It didn't take long for things to escalate. I tried to keep my distance from Emma's work, but I could feel the storm brewing around her. Every time she called, her voice sounded more defeated, and every time I saw her, the spark that had once defined her was dimming. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and increasingly desperate. I had hoped that I could work in the shadows, quietly shifting the tides in our favor without her knowing. But Gregson wasn't one to be outmaneuvered easily. The more I uncovered about his operations, the more dangerous the situation became. He wasn't just trying to undermine Emma's project. He was actively sabotaging it. He had made quiet deals with the media to run negative stories, positioning Emma as an inexperienced, out-of-touch environmentalist. He had even started putting pressure on the local authorities to halt their operations, citing unsanitary conditions on the cleanup ships. Emma was starting to crack under the pressure. One evening, after another disastrous meeting with Gregson's company, she came home late, her face pale, eyes hollow from exhaustion. She slumped into the chair at our dining table, her fingers running through her hair. I stood by the door, not sure whether to intervene or give her space. I knew she needed me, but I didn't know how to approach her without revealing the truth. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," she muttered, her voice barely audible. "I thought we were making a difference, but now it feels like I'm just throwing money into a void. Everything is falling apart, Alex." I took a step forward, my heart aching for her. "You can't give up. You've built something amazing, Emma. You're stronger than this." She looked up at me then, her eyes locking onto mine with a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "You don't understand, Alex. The people I'm working with, they don't care. Gregson doesn't care. No one does. They just want to make a profit, and I'm the one paying the price for it." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to tell her the truth then, to let her know that I wasn't just some quiet husband standing by. But I couldn't. Not yet. I knew that if I revealed my connection to Carter Industries, it would ruin everything we built together. She would never see me the same way again. I tried to comfort her, but I could feel the distance between us widening. She didn't want my sympathy. She wanted solutions. She needed a way out of the nightmare she was trapped in. And I knew that I was the only one who could provide that escape, but the cost was high. The following week, I decided to confront Gregson. I couldn't keep hiding in the shadows. The longer I waited, the more Emma's project and her spirit crumbled. So I took a calculated risk. I arranged a private meeting with Gregson, pretending to be just another concerned investor in his company. I was careful not to reveal too much too soon, keeping the conversation casual at first. But as we dug deeper into his involvement with the marine project, his true colors began to show. "You're wasting your time with her, Carter," Gregson said, his tone dismissive as we sat across from one another in his sleek corporate office. "That project's never going to succeed. You're better off cutting your losses and moving on to something more profitable. Emma's vision is noble, but it's unrealistic." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "You don't know her like I do. She's been fighting for this for years, and I'm not going to let you destroy everything she's worked for." Gregson chuckled, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Oh, I know exactly how to destroy it. You see, Carter, this is business. And in business, you have to be ruthless. You either play the game or you get left behind. Your wife's too naive to realize that." The words stung, but I held my ground. I couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. "You're making a mistake, Gregson. One that you'll regret. I'm not going to let you ruin her or this project." He raised an eyebrow, clearly not understanding the weight of my words. "And what are you going to do about it? You're just some rich guy who has no real stake in the outcome. You can't stop me." His arrogance was infuriating, but I knew better than to let him get under my skin. I stood up, straightening my jacket. "I might not be a player in your game, but I know how to make the rules change. If you continue to sabotage Emma's work, I'll make sure you're the one who's left behind." He laughed, clearly dismissing me, but I could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. As I left his office, my mind raced. I had made my move, but I had no idea what Gregson would do next. The tension between us was palpable, and I knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger confrontation. Back at home, I could feel Emma pulling further away from me. She was still fighting, but her belief in the project and in herself was weakening. I couldn't tell her what I had done, not yet, but I was beginning to wonder if I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was uncertain. I knew that if I wanted to save both Emma's project and my relationship with her, I would have to go all in. But the question was, could I really make it all work without losing her in the process? The moment of truth arrived with an unexpected phone call. I had spent weeks walking a tightrope, balancing my covert actions with my attempts to protect Emma. But nothing prepared me for the moment when Emma stormed into our apartment, her face flushed with anger and frustration. Her eyes were wild, and I could see the exhaustion that had been building in her for months. "I know, Alex," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. "I know everything." My heart sank. I'd been caught. No, it was worse than that. She wasn't just angry about my secret involvement in the corporate world. She was devastated because she felt completely betrayed. "Emma, listen, please," I said, trying to calm her down, but she was having none of it. "I don't need you to fix things, Alex. I don't need your money, your influence, your corporate connections." Her voice broke, and I could see the raw emotion in her eyes. "I thought you were on my side. I thought you loved me for who I am, not for what I can do for you. But now I see it. Everything, all of it. You were just using me to play some kind of power game." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but no words came out. How could I explain the truth to her? How could I make her understand that I had acted out of love, not selfishness? "I don't want to be a part of your corporate world," Alex, she continued, pacing back and forth. I wanted to make a difference, not become part of some big power struggle. And you knew all along what Gregson was doing, didn't you? You let him destroy everything I built just to save your own ego. Her accusations hit me like 1,000 knives. She was right in some ways. I had kept things from her for too long, and the trust between us was shattered. But she didn't see the bigger picture. She didn't know how much I had sacrificed to keep her project alive, how far I had gone to expose Gregson for the fraud he was. I felt the weight of her words bearing down on me. All this time, I had been hiding behind my wealth, my power, believing that I could save her from the corporate vultures that preyed on people like her. But I had never stopped to consider how she would see me once the truth came out. I'm sorry, I finally said, the words feeling hollow and insignificant in the face of her pain. I never wanted you to think that I was using you. I wanted to protect you, to help you succeed in a world that's set up to crush people like you. I thought if I could control things behind the scenes, you wouldn't have to deal with the dirty side of it. She stopped in her tracks, her chest heaving with the weight of her emotions. But you're part of that dirty side, Alex. You can't just fix things by throwing money at them or calling in favors. You've become the very thing you hated. Corporate greed. You were never on my team, were you? That question hit me harder than anything else. It was a wake-up call, a brutal reality check that I had been avoiding for too long. I had spent so much time hiding in the shadows, trying to play both sides, that I had lost sight of who I was, and whom I had become in Emma's eyes. I wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. I was just another rich businessman, hiding behind the mask of helping her. For the first time in months, I truly saw how far I had fallen. I didn't want this to happen, I whispered. But I've made things worse, and I can't fix it, Emma, not by myself. She looked at me then, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in them for a long time. Disappointment. It was like a knife in my chest. I need you to decide what you really want, Alex, she said quietly. I need you to choose. You can keep hiding in the world you created, or you can come back to me. But I won't be a part of your game anymore. I won't let you destroy everything I've worked for. Her words were like a slap to my face. It was clear that Emma was at her breaking point. She didn't just want my apologies or my promises. She needed action. She needed to see that I could change, that I could truly be the man she thought I was. But the question was I even capable of doing that? The reality of the situation hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I had a choice to make, and there was no going back. I could keep playing the game, using my influence to take down Gregson and save Emma's project. But that would mean sacrificing everything she had stood for. Or I could walk away from it all, tell my family and the company that I was done with that life, and let Emma see that I was truly committed to her cause. The decision wasn't easy. My entire life had been built on the foundation of power and wealth, and to walk away from it felt like losing a part of myself. But as I looked into Emma's eyes, I realized that I had already lost her in the process. If I didn't act now, if I didn't show her that I could change, I would lose her for good. I choose you, I said, my voice trembling. I choose us. Emma looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. Then prove it. And just like that, everything changed. The next few days felt like an eternity. I had made the decision to walk away from the life I had built, to show Emma that I was committed to her, and to the cause she had dedicated her life to. But making that choice was just the first step. I now had to prove that I could follow through. Emma didn't want me to make any grand gestures. She didn't want more promises or flashy displays of wealth and influence. What she wanted was simple: honesty, transparency, and dedication. I realized that those were things I had never truly given her before. All my life, I had been operating in the shadows, pulling strings behind the scenes. But now there was no hiding. I had to stand by her, side by side, and fight for her project as an equal partner, not as a billionaire with an agenda. The first step in that process was letting go of everything I had known. I called a meeting with my father and the board of directors at Carter Industries. It was time to relinquish my position as a shareholder, to cut ties with the company that had been the foundation of my power. As I sat in the boardroom, looking around at the cold, calculating faces of the men and women who had supported me for years, I realized just how much I had been controlled by the world I had built. I had allowed greed and ambition to cloud my judgment, to pull me further away from the things that truly mattered. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I'm stepping down. I'm selling my shares." The room fell silent. My father's eyes narrowed, and I could see the shock on his face. "You're making a mistake, Alex. You've worked too hard for this. You can't just walk away." "I'm not walking away from everything, Dad," I replied. "But I'm walking away from this." I gestured to the cold, polished room that had been my home for so long. "This is not who I want to be anymore." It wasn't an easy decision, but it was one I had to make. For the first time in my life, I was choosing my own path, not one dictated by power or wealth. I was choosing the woman I loved and the person I wanted to become. That same day, I called Gregson. The conversation was straightforward. I told him I was pulling out of the deal, that I was taking my influence away from his company and from the Marine project. He was furious, of course, but there was nothing he could do. I had the leverage to crush him if I wanted to, but instead, I just let him burn out on his own. The project wasn't immediately saved. It was a slow uphill battle. But with the resources I had given up, Emma was able to rally the support of new investors, ones who actually believed in her vision. She rebuilt her team, and together, they worked tirelessly to prove the naysayers wrong. Gregson's company, stripped of its corporate protection, eventually crumbled under the weight of its own greed and dishonesty. I stayed by Emma's side through it all. We didn't make headlines. We didn't push for fame or recognition. Instead, we worked in silence, watching the tide of change slowly, but surely turn in our favor. Emma's marine cleanup project began to grow, gaining international attention for its innovative approach to ocean preservation. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I loved smile again, not because of the success of the project, but because she was finally doing it on her terms. As for me, I had learned the hardest lesson of my life. Power, influence, and money could only take me so far. But true fulfillment came from living with integrity, from standing by the people you love, and from putting others before yourself. I had spent too many years hiding behind a mask of success, trying to fix things in my own way without considering the consequences. But I had learned that love wasn't about fixing. It was about standing together, facing the challenges head-on, and trusting each other to find the way forward. One evening, as Emma and I walked along the beach, the sun dipping below the horizon, I turned to her and took her hand. "I'm proud of you," I said softly, my voice filled with admiration. "You did it. You changed the world." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of the sunset. We did it. Together. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what happened next, we had built something that no one, no corporate mogul, no greedy businessman, could tear apart. The conflict had tested us both, but it had also brought us closer. We had faced our darkest moments, confronted our fears, and learned that true strength came not from wealth or power, but from the courage to change. The battle was over, and in its place, a new beginning had emerged, one built on trust, love, and a shared vision for a better world.